I'm your host, Kim Lowe. We have a very special friend in the house tonight, and it just happens to be November 23rd, which, hello, is the new moon in Sagittarius at 2 degrees. So we are getting the party started for the zodiac sign of Sagittarius, of hope, of inspiration, enthusiastic things. And I just want to really give a nod because this is the day before Thanksgiving in the States here. And as we all prepare our food and as we all get ready to bring our particular best dishes, gourmet or not, from farm to table, or however you prepare your wonderful meal and give thanks and gratitude for all of the wonderful things in your life, I thought it'd be really nice to invite someone on the show that is an expertise in exactly how that food is raised and how to grow absolutely fantastic, nutrient enriched food. And what's the difference between the absolute base when you start? And a lot of people now are coming to the realization that number one, they want acreage, they want a well, they want their own water, so they're not on that grid that way. They also want to raise their own food, whether it's the preservatives that's in it, or whether it's the cost of the food or the packaging, or some people are finding out that they are allergic to specific things and they're trying to track down exactly what it is in their menu that they're eating, to just really lead a more healthy life. And the very, very basis of your food supply is what we're going to learn all about tonight. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this wonderful friend of mine. We've known each other for decades. Her name is Cristy Christie, and her business is called Black Diamond Vermicompost. And she is the owner. It's based in Paso Robles, California, where she has over 1 million employees, but they're red worms. And she grew up in Pozo, California, which is an 1800 saloon stagecoach stop between Bakersfield and the Pacific Coast. So she has, this wonderful backdrop in her family of being raised in this, let's just say, historical setting. So she has a lot of stories and a lot of fun details about the Old West because she was raised on a cattle ranch where her family still resides. She's her background, actually, when I met Cristy, and I'm not talking about, the last governor of New Jersey. She has a wonderful name, and I every time I hear it, I just giggle, and I love it because when I found out about Chris Christie, the governor of New Jersey, I thought, oh my gosh, you have my girlfriend's name. And because she had it first, of course, in my life, but she's had a wonderful background. She has been in event planning, real estate sales, sales team development and management, and public speaking. And about 12 years ago, she went on this entrepreneurial journey. I have to tell you about it. It is just so interesting what she learned from scientists, from her mentors, from educators, and everything that she has researched about vermicompost. And she's going to be talking about exactly what vermi means and all of the research she's done, the trials that she's done, the experiments to really be convinced about what nutrients go into healthy soil. And I have to I have to just, the question to me that, comes up, and I really have to share this with all of you. And the question that I totally had was, you know, what is dirt versus soil? So please welcome to the show my very good friend, Cristy Christie. Hi, honey. How are you?
I'm fine, Kimla. Thank you for the invitation. This is an honor. You just have no idea. So I appreciate this platform. And it is Thanksgiving, and we do have a lot to be thankful for. And there's a whole bunch of people out there looking to grow healthy food and learn what soil means and how to compare it to dirt and those things. So, just a little bit of background over and above what you said was I left the Bay Area in 1998, and I left to be with mom back here in Pozo. We suddenly lost dad, and mom was rambling around in this big, gigantic house, and I came home to be with her. And a couple of years later, I got married, and I began to run Jack, my husband's construction office, his contracting office. So I did that, but I knew Jack was going to be retiring, and then we'd both be out of a job. So what was I going to do, and what was he going to do? And I really didn't want to go back into real estate. But so it was very timely. I was looking for other things to do. I started a couple of online businesses. And my sister called one day, and she said, my older sister, she called and she says, Cristy, we're going into the worm business. And I went, what? Pardon me? No, we're going into the worm business. I've been researching this now for 6 or 8 months, and the organic movement is happening. People are getting excited about growing organic. I think we're just really on the cusp of something very, very special.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'll learn. So I did. And I went online. I listened to, I got totally into it. I read a bunch of little books, and I went all over the country, literally looking at what's a worm farm anyway? What does it look like? How do people do this? And how does it work? So
Yeah. And
really
what does worms have to do with dirt and soil? What's the
right.
deal?
Well, the basic deal is that if we have worms in our soil, then that's one indication, a very strong indication that we have healthy soil. Here in California, where I am, we don't have hardly any rain. And worms need a lot of water. So we can't sustain a worm population in our grounds. And the only place we really see them is after a rain around a turf zone, like a golf course or parks or something like that. And we see them all over the sidewalks. And but they're there because they have food to eat and they're wet. But the real thing is that worms are really their worm poop, let's put it that way, or worm castings. They're worm poop. They are, I would call it nature's original fertilizer, because what they take in and what they poop out is exactly what plants need in order to grow strong, build their immune system, grow really, really healthy food and crops, whether it's flowers, nuts, it doesn't matter what you're growing. If that worm casting material is in around a root zone, that establishes the fertility and the base of a really, really solid, strong, healthy soil base.
So worms are like just as important as bees to our environment. Wow.
They
Okay.
are. And when we see worms, we actually know that they have food. So they don't have eyes, they don't have ears, they're very sensitive to light. There's a lot of different kinds of worms. There's over 5,000 species of worms. But the worms that we are using are what we call compost worms. and they reside in the top layer of the system that we feed them in or hold them in.
So give the definition of what compost really is, or when somebody says, there's a lot of people who are building their own homes, custom work, and they're saying, I want to have a place where I can compost. So talk a little bit about what that is, and about how you can stand out in a crowd among everybody else with yours. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, compost, I'll start with it all starts in the soil. And everything that we grow it really starts in the soil. So when we have a growing medium, Mother Earth provided the base of the minerals. So when the Earth started millions and millions of years ago, we had big, gigantic rocks, and now those rocks are tiny and they're soil. So they start with either sand, silt, or clay. And if we want to know the base of what we're growing in, if we're not in a raised bed and we have additions to that raised bed to make a growing medium, if we're growing in the ground, like most farmers do, then we want to know if we've got sand, silt, or clay. That's our base. That's our physical dirt. And we can do that. It's really easy to look up a mason jar soil test
Okay.
online and find it, and you can take a little sample of your own dirt in your backyard, do a little experiment with it, and start, and you'll find out if you're starting with sand, silt, or clay.
Okay.
The next thing people need to have an understanding of is what is in that mineral content. And mineral content can be heavy in calcium in one place, and it could be heavy in magnesium in another place. It could be heavy in iron in one place. We kind of need to know where we're at. So it's kind of like our own bodies. If we're imbalanced somewhere, what do? We go take a test and we get something tested. So we do that with our soil too. And we go get a soil test. We find out what kind of minerals we have, if we're excessive in one, if we're deficient in another. And now we know what we're starting with. After that, all growing things need microbiology, soil microbiology, and they need, of course, water, and they need organic matter. So the organic matter part comes in the compost that you mentioned. And most of the time we hear about compost. I love people who make their own compost. We can make the best compost in the world that we make it ourselves. And why? Because we know what's in that compost pile. We know what we put in that. We don't know what we're buying at a store when we go buy a bag of compost. And there's a lot of information that needs to be understood when it comes to understanding what really compost is.
Let me ask you a question. Are they, by regulation, do they have to put in on the label what exactly you're buying when you buy, dirt plant for, plants or anything like that, or for, just vegetables or whatever? Are they
Yeah,
legal? Yeah.
yeah, we do have to have an understanding of what's in it. The part to me that I get a little disturbed about is there is a regulation that says, if it's called the National Organic Practices, NOP, and if you compost a whole bunch of organic started material, let's say landscapers, you'll go to a landscape supply house and you'll see green waste compost, organic green waste compost, for example. We take that green waste compost and we need to hope that the lawns and the grass clippings and the prunings from the landscapers aren't laced with pesticides and
Yeah.
insecticides. We don't know. That's why I
Right.
like that's why I think making your own compost is so important.
Right.
So we kind of have to trust that. The other side that we do is that compost, we're just a huge society of waste makers.
Yeah.
And we just have a whole bunch of waste. We produce over 250 million tons of food waste from a variety of channels, but they all have to go somewhere.
Right.
And when they come into our big, gigantic municipal compost facilities, they have to heat it up really hot. And that really kind of messes up the bacterial profile of what grows plants really well, because there's a lot of bacteria on the planet, and they're of a variety of millions and millions of different kinds. But at certain temperatures, they die off. And our plants, if you think about the soil temperature, it's not 160 degrees. So that's what happens in a compost facility. They heat it up really, really hot. And if they get it to certain temperatures, it's now called organic. It can be labeled organic. Well, is it really organic? Well, it's organic by composting practices, but you and I might think of organic as no pesticides, no fungicides, no science
Yeah,
of any
that's what
kind.
I thought it would be for sure.
Yeah.
Oh,
So we
that's
just have to understand that when we're going in.
wow. Okay.
Yeah. So to take it a little bit further with the growing medium, or what we're growing in, I like to use the term the 3 M's. If we understand the 3 M's, we can really get a handle on growing things. And the 3 M's would be the minerals that I mentioned, the microbes that are soil microbiology, and the organic matter, the OM, the third M. And the organic matter is what the microbes feed on. And in the growing medium, all of them all get together and all sorts of things happen. We know probably maybe 10%, a very small fraction of the numbers of bacteria and fungi and protozoa and nematodes and all the invisible critters that are in our soil. We only have a very, very small amount of those that are actually identified. We don't know most of what's happening in the soil. We're learning a lot. Science is still catching on and grabbing, and with the electron scanning microscopes, it's amazing what we can find and see and start to understand. But there's a lot we don't know. What we do know is the more diversity that we have in the soil when it comes to bacteria and fungi and all those things, the better the soil works.
So let me ask you, because for me, being an astrologer, and working with, working with the cosmos, everything is energy. And if I was testing soil, I would say, okay, what frequency does it need to be at as to be healthy, or to, let's say, be enriched, to have the nutrients working and all of that? Is there a specific frequency that you work with?
That's a really, really good question. I do not know the answer to that. Yeah, you're going to give me something else to do homework on. That's awesome.
Okay.
That's great. There's got to be. I mean, we're all energy.
Yeah.
And where are these energy levels? And the vernacular I'm not very good at, but that's a really good place to start.
Okay.
What we do know is it's sort of like, soil is like us and plants are like us. They need food, they need air, they need water. What happens if we cut our water off? It's not a pretty sight. What happens
Right.
if we cut our air off? So there's a lot of places. When I do consulting work out here in California and I go to farms, the first thing that I want to look at, a few first things, is what's the pH? Is it acid soil? Is it alkaline soil? Plants like to be right in the middle, 6.5, 7.5. They really want to be in the neutral zone. And
Okay.
then there's some that really like to be more acidic, like blueberries. So the pH will drive certain things. Then we have the compaction. Is it really super tight soil? Is it clay? Is it heavy? Is it compacted? Roots can't grow if it's really, really compacted. So we need to give them air. So food, air, and water, same thing that we need.
Right. Absolutely. And a lot of times when I'm thinking about, you were talking about water, and I'm thinking about different areas, what you get. Oh, well, let's just talk about grapes since you're out in California. And good California wine. um, and I'm sure, just like anything else, each particular crop that you are, wanting to grow probably needs a little bit of customizing in the soil. And what, like you were saying, is it acid, is it more alkaline, and what's going back and forth there. Um, but what, this is funny because I was talking to this musician, and they were talking about, you know, um, the different years where you have a lot of rain, and the rain comes in, and of course the rain has hydrogen and has a lot of minerals to it, yeah, and it's got more electricity in it, and it's got more hydrogen and all of that. Okay. And he said that you can tell if you cut a tree down and you look at the rings of the tree, you can tell where the rings are each year of that tree, if it was a water year or a drought year, and that kind of a thing. And he said that in Italy, they search for a specific tree that had this water. It was kind of like a water decade, I think. And that particular wood of that tree makes the sweetest sounds for violins.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So I'm
Yeah.
thinking, sometimes you get you get a drought, just like what happened, in the Dust Bowls in the 1930s, where okay, everything was wiped out, people moved, they lost everything, the food, there was a depression, blah 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 blah. And I'm thinking that with this testing of these, nuclear missiles and a lot of things that are going on, the fallout, if one country, this is what I don't understand, and maybe you can help me here, but if one country decides, well, I'm going to test this nuclear missile, I'm sorry, the earth is actually turning. I mean, hello. It just doesn't just, it can hang, it might have some hang time, is what I'm saying. A rocket goes up, and, the engine block, the rocket can go up in Florida, and the engine block can be found, in Hawaii or something like that. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, we're all on planet Earth. We're all on Mother Earth. And to do all of this, I mean, we literally are victims to whatever is going on all over the planet, right?
Well, we are, and some of it's good and some of it's not so good. Out here in California, we've suffered from an awful lot of fires in the
Oh,
last
right,
decade. It's just been
right.
really, really tough.
That's
Yeah.
heartbreaking out there.
Oh,
Heartbreaking.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is. But on the other hand, there's these natural disasters, which are just incredibly um, fascinating to study. So for example, Mount St. Helens, if you
Okay.
looked at before and after Mount St. Helens and went back 40, 50 years to look at the landscaping around the mountain and what was growing there, and then look at it, what's growing there now, it's an amazing transformation. So
Oh,
it's
really?
like it's like beautiful. It's like incredible.
So all of
So
that ash turned into like a enrichment for the composting and for Mother Earth to really give a boost to the
Yeah.
crops and the healthy quotient that's around there. Wow, I didn't realize that.
And some of the other things like mineral, when we were talking about minerals, one of the great things that to add to soil is called azomite. And azomite is actually an acronym for A to Z minerals in short form. And it comes from a volcanic deposit. And all of these trace minerals come out of this mine. And when we add that to soil, it just is amazing what can happen to it, unless you happen to be in a volcanic zone. But we're not here in California, so it's very helpful to have those kinds of additions. So when we think of things like adding, okay, we start with sand, silt, or clay. We're going to check the pH and get that leveled out however we need to. We're going to add some organic matter and build this soil system with the invisible microbes, bacteria and fungi and so on. We're going to add the trace minerals. And maybe we need some other things that we get from soil tests. As much as we work that soil to plant and grow things determines how much we have to feed the soil again. So if we're just planting once a year and we've got some tomatoes and peppers and that's all we're doing, we're not depleting that soil a lot. But if you're growing over and over and over, it's kind of like an oil change. If you drive 1,000 miles a day, you're going to get a lot of oil changes.
Right.
If you drive 1,000 miles every 6 months, you're not going to need to change your oil that often. So our plants are taking food out of the soil and we need to give it back. So a soil test will help us guide us to those things that we need. So to go back to a little bit of things about worm castings, which I like so much, is, there's compost is really, really good. Vermi, which is Latin for worm, is even better. And that's because the worm castings are in this compost. So there's one of the cool things, several cool things about worm castings is they contain plant growth regulators. They're sort of like our hormones in our bodies.
Okay.
They actually contain things that will regulate the growth of the plant when it's necessary to have something happen. So if it's time to start pushing a flower for a peach, then it'll call for certain things in the soil. The plant will call for certain minerals to make that bud, that flower happen. When the fruit starts ripening, it's going to call for different minerals. They're amazingly smart things, plants are. And worm castings add that element to the soil. They also add things that will strengthen an immune system for a plant. And a lot of people don't know this, but trees, for example, they'll talk to each other. So we've been able to study now lots and lots of trees over an orchard. And if there's an overspray of pesticide or something on this side of the orchard, the tree on the other side gets the message and puts out an immune system like, okay, I'm here, I'm ready, go for it. So I think there's a couple of really cool documentaries. One's called When the Hidden Life of Plants. I think that's one of them. And there's some stuff out there that's just, they've done some great work animating some videos and scientific things to put it in our layman's language to see how plants respond to each other, how they take in minerals and nutrients, what happens with photosynthesis. And we're starting to get a real good handle on this.
Yes, and there's Dr. Emoto. He did the hidden life of water,
Right.
and what water does. So if he's tracked down, the difference, I mean, even, and also, and this is well known. I think it's in the fourth grade. The kids do this where they speak very harshly to one plant and speak very lovingly to another plant, and they see the difference after a month or so of what happens to that plant that they were verbally abusing and what happens to the other plant. And it's a visual like that, that I think is so powerful. And what we have done in the last 100 years is completely reverse what we're doing for our food, for our bodies,
Yeah.
right? I mean the corporations and how they're mass marketing the food chain, they have no concern about the value of energy that we're really eating. So this is actually altering our DNA.
It is.
This is what you're doing is so important, and to educate people on exactly, you know, it's the little things in life. It's the little worm that you go fishing with. It's like, wow. And, I mean, our ancestors knew all of this. They knew, how the building blocks for, not only for taking, but also, like you were saying, putting it back in, nourishing Mother Earth and doing all those things. When you're breaking down and you're rebuilding and you're co-creating this great recipe for, great stuff. And you've got to go to her website. She's got a pumpkin. Oh my God, her pumpkin is like massive. That's a great shot. I love that. But to mix up this base that is so rich and just so yummy, and then help me understand where you get the worms, where, do they breed, like, do they give birth to 100 worms? I don't understand any of that. So let's talk about the life of the hidden worm.
Well, I will tell you that. But before I forget, Darwin's second book was on earthworms. It's
Wow.
315 pages long before copywriting laws came into effect. So you could go get it online, read the PDF, the whole thing if you want. You really only need to read the last 4 pages. But on page 312, if you do go there, I love the description of the worm and what he does. But he spent 29 years studying worms and what they were doing and why. And even at one point wanted to see if there was an intellect of sorts with them.
Right.
So he took something like 275 leaves and put them around the worm holes, because the earthworm that he was studying were the kind that go way down deep into the ground. They burrow, they hang out there, and at night they come out, they poop, and they mate, and they drag food back into their burrows. So that was the species that he was studying. He wanted to see if they knew which end of a leaf they were actually pulling into their burrow. So he studied and watched them and just watched them all night long. How are they going to take the pointy end? Or are they going to take the end that's attached to the branch? Which end are they?
Them, yeah.
Even tried to fake them out.
Wow.
and break the stem off that goes onto the branch and put it on the other end. This guy had way too much time. But
he's an exciting guy.
So, but you can read the last few pages. He's got a reference list that's back in the 1800s. This reference list is a mile long. Fascinating guy. So, worms. What I decided to do, because I was going to be able to do this myself, Jack was still working at the time. And when I told him I was going to go into the worm business, he simply rolled his eyes and said, yeah, right. So I went all over the place, and there's a lot of ways to farm worms, and it's kind of shown a little bit on the website on what I decided to do. But what I did recognize right away was it all has to do with the feedstock. What do you feed the worms, and what is what you're going to get out? So not all worm castings are created equal, and that is not on the bag. So you can go and find a bag of worm castings, big gigantic bag for $10. When I did my research and started cruising around, I found a worm farm that was all outside on the ground, miles and miles of rows of worms, and they were actually feeding those worms, when we had them, shredded yellow pages.
What?
That's what they fed their worms. They put shredded yellow pages all over them, and they watered it down, and it's cellulose. The worms went through it, but was it really very good? Did it promote a lot of microbiology? Were they healthy? So that kind of inexpensive product, you just have to recognize that what goes in might come out just equally as non-nutritious. So
Okay.
We chose to use organic, what we call separated dairy solids. It's material that comes from an organic dairy with grass-fed beef cows, which all eat nothing but organic. Their fields, and if it's inside and too rainy and they can't be outside eating grass because they'll wreck the pastures, then they're eating organic food that is like grass. It's not grain. Cows don't eat corn. I mean, that's not their natural diet. So that we take what we call the separated solids and we hot compost it so that it is building up all of this microbiology, which is what the worms are actually eating. So in a compost pile, bacteria are reducing this gigantic pile into something smaller. And if you have the right chemical makeup, what we call the carbons and the nitrogens together, it will naturally get hot. And when it gets naturally hot, that's because the bacteria are multiplying like crazy. And they're eating this material and taking it from a lot to a little bit. And then
they're creating their own energy. That's what they're doing.
Got it. So then we feed that material to the worms, and they work through it for about 2 or 3 months. And then we take that end product away from the worm bed and package it up and sell it. But in the process of the worms traveling up and down through this composted dairy manure, they're not only putting castings all over the place, the microbiology is just proliferating all by itself in an ambient temperature zone. It's all passive at that point.
So will this, with your compost and with your worm farms, the end product that you have, this compost, this black diamond compost, can it be used anywhere in our country or anywhere in the world? I mean, it's not like, oh, I'm sorry, you can't have this because it won't be compatible.
Yeah, no, it can be used anywhere. It can be used anywhere. So okay. The compost is very stable. The worm castings, they can go anywhere in any soil. I think what's cool about our product is that you don't need very much. It's very powerful. There's there is so much life in it that what we're doing is inoculating the bacterial life that's in the soil already with a different set of microbes. And when they all get together, they go crazy. So a lot of things happen in the soil with microbiology as a result of the worm castings and the compost. And we say less is more. So one of the ways that we use our product very effectively and economically is we use about, I don't know, a couple of tablespoons in the planting hole when we take transplants from whether we're germinating our own seeds or
That's all you need?
need
Oh, wow. Super plant food.
super plant food.
Whoa, that's all you need.
Yeah. So
Wow.
don't need a lot.
Wow.
And there are, food waste makes really great worm castings too. I think about, I just think about all of when I first started, my goal was a profitable business. I wanted to be a profitable
That's a
business.
good thing. Jack appreciated that goal.
I've talked to an awful lot of worm farmers that say, I don't care. This is the right thing to do. I don't want to make any money. I don't need to make any money. It doesn't matter if I can make any money. I just really want to make this product. Well,
doing it for the environment.
Yeah. And there's absolutely that's a very honorable place to come from. I just didn't come from that space. However, I would say after 3 or 4 years of people getting information, us doing some educating, them changing their gardening habits, and then coming back to me with these incredible stories that were mind-boggling and in many cases literally set me to tears, that I had to do this. I had to do this. This was very important work. And I remember Judy called me. She says, I have a rose bush that's having a real problem. I'm taking it. So she took a bag, and a few weeks later, she sent me a photograph. And on one side are these beautiful, long red roses. And on the other side is these puny little leaves. It's like, I picked up the phone and said, Judy, what happened? She said, well, I didn't know if it was going to work. So I only put it on half of the plant. And the roses were insanely huge. It was just incredible.
Wow.
Another time
that's one of the things that I love about, having these great results that you can literally see. You know what I mean? I deal with unseen energy so much in what I do. And for you to get all of this validation back has really got to be. But what I find that is so fantastic is that you can spend so many years of your life trying to do different work and trying to have a different career. And then all of a sudden, the reason or your mission planet gets activated. And it makes all the difference in the world because that's what gets you out of bed. That's what you're proud of. That's what makes you validate yourself and respect yourself and keeps you in that lane and keeps you pushing on. I am so proud of you that you have activated your mission on the planet.
Well, it's just been an incredible journey. I remember a gentleman from the valley, the San Joaquin Valley, had a 25-acre orange grove that he had inherited from his dad. His dad was a conventional farmer, used lots of chemicals and so on, and he didn't want to do that. So he transitioned, and that process takes about 3 years. Trees especially have a real tough time getting unaddicted to synthetic fertilizers.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, they go through major withdrawals.
Wow.
So,
And I was doing research and I found out that that Russia, Belarus, a lot of countries are inundating our country with synthetic fertilizer, and it's very, very expensive. And
It's
that this
getting, yeah.
and that this is the option, they want our country to use. And and I thought, oh my gosh, I who knew that there was a dirt war going on out there? You never know. You dig
You
a
never know.
little bit, but then you start researching, like, oh my God, there's actual dirt wars going on. That's crazy.
And
Wow.
water wars. Yeah.
And water wars.
Yeah.
Yeah. Elements. Yeah. And water wars. That's
Yeah.
craziness. Oh my gosh. But I had no idea that they get addicted to the chemicals.
They do. And when we transition into either natural, organic farming, whatever term you want to put onto it, it went from sustainable to now it's regenerative. There's all the terminology that go along with just really good common sense farming without the chemicals. And there are things that we have to understand about plants that go through that process. And if they are not getting these fungicides and so on, then they're going to likely get sick, or the soil is going to get sick. So this gentleman called me and he said, I'm on year 3. I'm on year 3, and my citrus are really, really suffering from Phytophthora, which is a common citrus disease. It's around the roots. And I've heard about you. I started reading about it. I'm going to try your liquid part because we can extract the microbiology and the nutrients out of the compost into water and irrigate that with that.
Oh.
So he came over and purchased some and came back 6 months later, came back 6 months later. And the last time he came back with his wife. And she took me aside and she said, you have given my husband hope. He was going to give up farming after 50 years. Wow. But his trees look wonderful. He wrote me a letter. I called him. I said, can I put this on my website? And he said, if you don't, you're crazy.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah. I listen to these stories and say, it works. It works. Diversity of microbiology, healthy soil, air in the root zone. The other thing that we have to contend with is monocropping. If we only have one thing growing and it's only grapes for miles and miles and miles, that's not how nature works. Nature works with a diversity of plants.
Oh, okay.
So if we have I think of an English garden with lots of different kinds of flowers and trees and big trees and understory canopies, a variety of things going on in there, you get a much more diverse soil. It attracts more good bugs. And when we do insecticides and things like that, we really have to understand that 80% of the bugs out there are good. 80%. We only got 20% that aren't so good. And they're good in a way. Like a lot of people will suffer from aphids. Well, that's because there's a reason. There's a reason that there's an influx of these aphids, which are going to eat our rose bushes or our, plants. So when we use insecticides, we just killed off the ladybugs that are going to eat the aphids. So we need to understand it's like our own microbiome.
Balance. Yes. Such a delicate balance in everything. You grow your beautiful rose bushes and all of these other things, hibiscus and these beautiful plants. And actually those plants were for the animals. And we're like, oh no, I don't want my, the deer eating my plants. And I'm just like, excuse me, that is exactly why we have plants. And yes, they're great to look at, but hello, we're
Yeah.
feeding the animals. We forget all of this. We're such a selfish brood, aren't we? My God, we're just so self-centered. We're not team players. We're just not. You've got to be on Team Mother Earth.
Yeah.
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 And I'm just so happy that you're doing this work. And there's a lot of people out there that may not think, oh, worm farms may not be a specific topic I want to spend, an hour on a YouTube channel learning about, but hey, wake up, because this is good information. I mean, excellent information. This is exactly what you're doing 3 times a day. I mean, it all comes down to the worm. It's just fascinating stuff. And today, I just want to insert this real quick, but it all comes together like a tapestry in life, because today is the new moon. And as everybody, all your farmers know, that you plant during a new moon, the dark of the moon, it's the dark of night. And this is when you plant. And I thought, oh, this is just so perfect. I can't even believe it. And so we take it to another level where we say, okay, this new moon is about new hopes, new wishes, new, co-creating new things to come into your life. And we always encourage a wish list, 10 wishes, state it like it's positive in your life already. But at this particular new moon is so fertile and it's so enriching, because today as well, we have got the expansion planet Jupiter turning direct. It was going backwards for a long time, and now it's turning direct. So everything that you have learned in the inside is now about to be manifested on the outside of it. So everything you learned on the inside is now going to give you results, is going to be validated. And all of us tonight, we can, really honor this wonderful celebration of Thanksgiving by knowing that the food that you eat, does it lack energy? Are we eating dead food? Or are we eating food that's alive and that has, energy to it? Because if you are eating dead food and you are, fatigued, you are full of inflammation, you're full of pesticides, like what you were saying. I mean, it only makes sense when you were talking about the trees being addicted to these pesticides. It only makes
Fertilizers.
Oh, excuse me,
Fertilizers.
fertilizers. It only makes sense that we would probably go through a withdrawal if we didn't have that kind, of food. Do you think that we would?
Well,
If
I think what we can easily relate to is flavor. So, for example, when I started, I was doing all this learning and so on. But in the meantime, I put together a little worm bin, had my worms going, and we planted some broccoli with our own worm castings. And we watched it grow, and we watched these leaves get big and dark and strong, and the broccoli started showing up, and wow, we couldn't wait to harvest it. And when I harvested it, I called Jack, and I mean, it scared the poor guy. I said, Jack, come here. He came out, and we ate this broccoli at the sink. It never made it to the salad bowl. We just like, oh my gosh, this is so good. It was full of flavor. The stalks were full of flavor. They weren't hollow like the kind that you get in the market. It tasted really, really full. It tasted like broccoli. And we knew at that point, number one, we had to do this because this is just like, there's got to be something to this vermicompost stuff. But it's also like what we do, you and I, everybody does. We go to the market, we look at these beautiful peaches. We can't wait to dive into it. And it's just pith. There's no flavor.
Right.
There's no flavor. There's no nutrition.
Oh.
And when we grow our own stuff, I mean, how many of us love tomato time or summertime because they taste so darn good? Or we have our own plum tree and its flavor is nutrition.
And the stuff that you do buy in, your regular grocery, they have no smell. There's no smell.
Right.
If there's no smell, there's not going to be any flavor.
There's no value.
There's no value. There's no energy and that's why you're eating, is to put energy back in. I love the fact that you're restoring Mother Earth. I love the fact that you're restoring our DNA. It all comes down to that, because that's what we're passing on, actually.
So true.
Yeah. And that we're really working, we're really addressing the situation and awakening to the fact of how important the life of the worm really is. Cristy, if somebody wants to get a hold of you now, a question that I have is, will you help the little person, the little gardener? Will you help them? And do you have a little portion for, your backyard crop?
They're my favorites.
For big ranches now.
No, they're my favorites. People who are receptive, who want to learn, who want to grow food. That's who I care most about. And, I really firmly believe that there should be a small vermicomposting operation in every community, in every town. We don't need to ship this stuff all across the country. In fact, right now, I'm in the process of setting up a worm farm very similar to what I have here in California, in Florida. So there are people out there that want to do what I do. They want to know what I do, why I do what I do, and they want to know how I do it. And I think it's very important for those little operations, mid-scale, small operations, to be everywhere. And a lot of people just don't quite know how to market this product.
Right. So just to kind of reiterate that, to use these web type tools, because obviously it's global and, it's the best educator out there for all of us. I mean, it sure beats the encyclopedia that I had when I was a kid.
No kidding.
It did teach you the alphabet, though. That's however, yeah. How do they get a hold of your website? Why, you have so many different things that stand out, make you so unique in what you do. Please direct everyone to your website. How do they get a hold of you and what you can do for them?
Okay, well, easiest way is blackdiamondvermicompost.com. Email direct is Cristy, Cristy, at blackdiamondvermicompost.com. And phone number, text is fine too. And that number is 805-674-0194. I'm happy to talk to everybody. Just had a guy this morning from Indiana call me and say, "You guys make the best compost tea. Will you tell me your recipe?" Absolutely.
Wow, good. Well, that's awesome. I want to wish you and yours a wonderful Thanksgiving, and you've given us such a great view on something to be just to be so thankful for, full of gratitude for food that's actually energy filled for us, and people like you that took time out just to research this and really come up with some beautiful combinations and recipes. And go to her website. You got to check out the pumpkin. That's all I'm saying. I'm like, Is that full of error? What is it full of?
Ah,
I'm a freak for pumpkin seeds, so I was like, oh my gosh.
okay. Yeah.
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 Yeah, so I was one of those. But anyone who is a backyard gardener, if you want to, I mean, I'm all for pushing a co-op in any kind of subdivision, even if you have to do rooftop gardening, if you've got to do it down the end of the street, buy an extra quarter lot, whatever it is. You know, a lot of the HOAs, I'm so wanting to change their particular codes and their legislation and their regulations so that people, if they don't have a backyard, like in Florida, a lot of people have pools in their backyard, but could they please use their front yard as a food source for their supply, and I'm all about kind of changing the way we look you know at our yards and our lawns and what really is beautiful and what we can really do, because I don't think people are really going to make a move or the laws are going to change until the food supply chain totally snaps, because then people freak out. What can I do? And that's what causes change in our lives. And then we're going to be better off. And I hope that when that happens, they can get your information.
Well, I think about the kids and the dogs and the kitties that are playing on the lawn, and I want that to be a healthy lawn.
Yeah, absolutely. A healthy lawn. I want everything we eat also to be healthy for, the next generation as well. I want to talk so much, you have to write some books, or at least get on and do a segment, every week about what you're doing. You're the perfect person to go out and expand, get your own channel and start with all of this and really make a difference, at least put on some type of an intro so that people who perhaps stumble across this particular show that we're doing can really get into get their hands dirty as the next step
Well,
into.
I appreciate the opportunity. It's just been so much fun. It's been
It
a delight.
has been. It's been a blast, and thank you so much for coming on. And you've been my one of my dearest friends for, like I said, for decades
A
now.
long time.
And I am so glad that you are on your mission, and this is why you're on planet Earth, and we're all the better for it. My love to Jack. Happy Thanksgiving to you and everyone who's tuned in. Question the food that you're eating and bless the food before you eat it, and really question exactly how it was grown and give thanks to abundance and good living. Thank you so much for coming on, and everyone out there, happy Thanksgiving. Much gratitude for you for following me. And if you'd like to push the subscribe button, like, and share it with a friend. Thank you so much for listening. Good night, everyone.
Good night.